as a discipline. I started to focus on aspects of Moorish history. Turns out one of my professors was actually a scholar in Lincolnian history, a professor retired by the name of Gabor Borit, Dr. Borit. And I remember even asking Dr. Borit after I graduated, because I was doing all this research then on Moorish history and came across references to the significance of Lincoln, and then would ultimately find that Adalbert Volk cartoon that I also have in the front of my book. And Dr. Borit did say primary sources talk about how swarthy or how dark in complexion Abraham Lincoln was. And there were many people who did think it was rather unusual. Now, Dr. Borit didn't say he was a Moor. He didn't say he was quote unquote black. But what he said was he was unusually dark by the standards of those who were recognized as so-called white, quote unquote white during the time. That's it. But when you add the other information and the things that would come along later, Brent Kennedy, who was a scholar of the Melungeons, who says that Lincoln was a Melungeon, and Melungeons were people of mixed African, Native American, and European ancestry, right? And some even point to the Melungeons as specifically being descendants of Moors. Others say they're descendants of Turks. I personally think it's Moorish more than it is Turkish, and again, I give more details and clarity to that in my book. And in subsequent writings, I'll even discuss that at length, because I found a whole lot more information that I know I need to include. So this information I'm getting as I'm reading on the side, but this is not being taught in the class that I'm in. So I went to this particular professor and I said, Dr. So-and-so, I just came across all these primary source Greek references that talk about this, this, and this. I said, how come you didn't discuss this in the class? To which he replied, Hosea, that's why you're here. And I said, well, he said, it isn't my responsibility to teach you about yourself. It's your responsibility to teach you about yourself. It's your responsibility to add more depth to the historical discourse. That's why you've opted to get a graduate degree in history and basically to teach it. So I was like, oh, okay. I don't necessarily agree. I said that to myself because I didn't want to cause any issues until I got my grade, per se. But the point was, I did understand what he was saying. And I kind of said, well, that goes back to what my uncle was talking about, that this is our responsibility to educate ourselves. When the Jewish community knew that it was being oppressed or subjugated, they didn't wait for the Christians to teach them Hebrew. They didn't wait for Christians to teach them about the history of the Jewish people. They said, guess what? You're going to Hebrew school, son, daughter. The rabbi is going to teach you about your history. So you had synagogues or temples that were teaching the Jewish community about what it is to be Hebrew or Jewish. Makes perfect sense. Nobody should be mad at them. They're doing what they were supposed to do. The problem is we ain't doing what we're supposed to do. We have waited around for other folks to teach us about ourselves. That doesn't make any sense.